Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called The Link Between Trauma and Your Sensitivity: How to Use Your Intuitive Gifts as Your Most Important Tool for Healing. My name is Stephen Dinan, and I'm the founder of the Shift Network. And I really am grateful to be here, partially because we're learning so much about sensitivity and how it really can be a superpower and how to transform what can be challenging into real gifts. I think this is particularly applicable to just about anybody who's been drawn to the Shift Network because we tend to be more open psychically, intuitively. There's more data that's moving into our systems, which gives us a lot more sensitivity spiritually and openness to a lot of other domains of knowledge and connection. But it also can come with challenges. And we're going to get to explore this with a really important pioneer in this field. Her name is Dr. Natasha Fallahi. She's known as the Sensitive Doctor. She's also the founder of Club Sensitive, and she's taught a number of programs for Shift. And I think you're going to really appreciate the brilliance and also the practicality of what she teaches here today. So Natasha, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me. I love doing work with the Shift Network, and I love the audience of the Shift Network. So it's an honor to be here.
Great. Well, we're going to dive in and we're going to get a lot of good practical insights today. And there's also a chance to go much deeper with Dr. Natasha in a brand new program. It's called Healing Trauma for Sensitives. So we're going to share a little bit about that at the end of the hour if you want to go further. So Natasha, I'd love for you to begin our journey today with a little bit about your journey and what really propelled you to focus a lot on how to navigate the gifts and challenges that come with sensitivity.
Yeah, definitely. I really am doing the work that I'm doing now because I brought together everything that I've learned over my entire life. I always say I never set out to be a doctor. I was never intentionally on this journey to become a healer or explore a lot of these topics, but my life led me there because I have always been a sensitive person. And growing up as a sensitive person, we have a very distinct experience in the world. And sometimes it takes us many years or many decades to realize that not everyone around us is having that same sort of highly sensitive experience. Sometimes we think that people are experiencing things in their mind or their body or their spirit or their energy in the same way. And sometimes just looking at our peers, even our family members, our siblings, our partners, we see that we're having, a little bit of a different experience. And that really led me to places that brought me a lot of creativity in my life, but also a lot of suffering, a lot of health problems, a lot of symptoms, because I was picking up so much information, not only from the external environment, but also from my internal environment. So it took me several decades to really make sense of that and understand that it was a unique experience that I was having in the world compared to maybe my loved ones or the people immediately around me. And then realizing that there was this huge community of other sensitive people also going through those types of life experiences. So my journey through my own health and healing led me to become a doctor. And in that experience, as I was learning everything from the textbook to our experiential and our hands-on learning, I was looking at it through the lens of, well, maybe this is what the textbook says or the standard of care, but how does a sensitive person experience this type of healing differently than the average person? And so my entire education had this lens on of how does this apply to sensitive people? It really transformed my journey and my healing. I went so much deeper in my own, recovery and healing through that process of learning healthcare and medicine. And then I came out of it understanding that I had this unique perspective and put together a bunch of new tools that was really specifically for other sensitive people. So that's where my practice grew. I have a private practice in Northern California. I do virtual coaching, and all of it is strictly with highly sensitive people, empaths, intuitives, and people who have really struggled to find a place in this world where they feel understood because of that heightened sensitivity and that intense experience that they tend to have in their mind, body, and spirit. So it was really kind of a meandering path for me, but it ended up being a wonderful world and community that I found and built through just doing the work myself.
Well, it's great that you did take all of that personal challenge and turn it into a blessing for others as well. So let's talk a little bit about trauma as well and how that may look different and maybe and things that might not be traumatizing for sort of kind of average people, and how
Yeah.
that might actually look differently with people who are more sensitive.
Yeah. So trauma itself, I kind of wanted to start out talking about what trauma is, because sometimes when we hear that word, we think it has to be some really dramatic, large event. And in psychology, those types of traumas are often referred to big T traumas, meaning capital T traumas. And these are things like war or, really violent crimes. And capital T traumas or big T traumas really often refer to things that your life is in imminent danger. Like there is a danger for a life or death experience. And so a lot of people think, well, those are traumas, and I haven't had a big T trauma, so I haven't had trauma in my life. But even within that lens of psychology, there are what we call little T traumas, which are things that often, rather than necessarily being a danger to your life in the moment, they reduce the quality of your life. So these are things that often are just chronic stress that can look like bullying or toxic relationships, things like this that over time we experience, and we are not at risk of losing our life in that moment, but they are traumatic to us over time. Another way I like to think about it, besides big T and little t trauma, are macro traumas or micro traumas. And in my training, we talk about traumas not just being necessarily physical or emotional, but they can also be biochemical. So things that can cause our body to hold on to these experiences, they can come from trauma, like actual physical trauma, like a car accident, falling off of a horse or a ladder, or something physical that it was actually traumatic to our body. Maybe we broke bones. Maybe it was a big, shocking physical event. But also, thoughts can be, in a way, like either thoughts or emotional experiences can be traumatic for people. And the third category is toxins, and that can be biochemical trauma. So this can be something like mold toxicity, or a lot of different environmental toxins that we have, kind of the insidious exposure to things like pesticides. These can be traumatic to people over time. So when we look at this larger sense of anywhere that our body experiences these insults, whether they're physical traumas, their thoughts, or their toxins, the actual definition of trauma is that when we have an experience that we are unable to integrate and resolve and return to homeostasis in that moment. So if we reframe trauma and think about it in that way, were there any major episodic experiences that we had, or little things that trickled in through our entire life that overwhelmed our system, and we weren't able to make sense of it, we weren't able to integrate it and create a greater sense of meaning out of it? Those things get stuck in our mind, body, spirit. And that's where we experience trauma or post-traumatic stress disorders from it that we carry with us. So when we think of trauma that way, I like to think of it just any experience of overwhelm we had that we were not able to integrate. So if we think about trauma like that, a lot of people have had trauma. It's not just the big T trauma. And I think that's the beginning of the importance of this work, and understanding how sensitive people pick up on so much more information in the external and the internal environments. So they're often having much more barrage of information, not enough time to process it, make meaning out of it, return to homeostasis. And that creates more experiences of overwhelm for these sensitive people that is different than somebody who's not as sensitive and isn't picking up as much information from their internal or external environments. So that's one of the foundational things as to why empaths and intuitives and highly sensitive people tend to experience more trauma than non-sensitive people.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like there's probably also a little bit of the validation of this kind of the micro traumas, the smaller T traumas, that maybe people who are sensitive have gotten the message, oh, stop being so sensitive, or you're dramatizing things too much, or things like that, that might have sort of, in a way, made them not feel accepting,
Right.
feeling accepting that these are legitimate forms of micro traumas that accumulate and that are preventing us from returning to homeostasis.
Yeah, and that actually can layer on top too, because that sense of dismissiveness or not being seen or not being heard, and then creating stories about themselves, having negative or limiting self-beliefs. But also, even in medicine, there's more and more of a conversation around medical gaslighting and how a lot of times people are dismissed because either there isn't the empathy for their experience because maybe the person who's treating them or listening to them hasn't had those sensitive experiences. So yeah, definitely the experience of being a sensitive person and not realizing that what they're experiencing is super valid, but it's different than other people. That can kind of layer on top of the stress and the trauma that they're already experiencing. So a big part of it is first the recognition and the acknowledgement that the traumas have even occurred. So in the first stages of any work that I do with people is actually taking an inventory of where there is stress, chronic stress, episodic stress, and post-traumatic stress in their life. So first, that evaluation and that recognition is one of the first steps of healing.
Hmm. How important is it to trace back to specific incidents? So like if you're accumulating lots of micro traumas, there's like maybe a lot of incidents versus like one big macro trauma that you're trying to unwind. How important it is to sort of like really get back into the root system of each instance, or is it more about the reset for your system as a whole?
I think that when I'm working with people or guiding them through their own healing journey, it's always helpful to go through a narrative history. And we have tools, and I like to go through narrative medicine to help people understand where there were major shifts in their life. However, it's really not necessary for healing to go back to or even figure out what the initial trauma was. There's no need to relive it. Sometimes I think when people think about trauma healing, they think they need to sort of relive really difficult or terrible experiences or memories they had. And that's really not necessary. It's more about evaluating our dynamic living body systems in the moment and finding out where we have these continued triggers and where we have these weak links of stuff that continues to get overwhelmed. So when we look at the body and the system, the mind, body, spirit as holistically as a whole, we can really kind of just assess where it's at and start doing tools to integrate and release stress experiences in the body without having to revisit the initial experience or even really knowing what it is, because a lot of us don't know that. Like I was saying, a lot of people who experience these small little t traumas or these micro traumas along the way maybe never acknowledged it as a stressor or a trauma. And so it's not really necessary to trace back their life and like reframe every decade or every year of their life in that way. But we want to start to acknowledge what still continues to persist. And what we also need to understand about trauma and trauma healing is that our bodies are incredibly intelligent. Our mind, body, spirit is always working in our favor, and it's doing the best it can to help us survive and thrive. A lot of times, though, some of those coping mechanisms that we use, we call it adaptive physiology, or just different adaptive tools that we have in that moment to make the best of a situation. We can get stuck in a pattern of that, and we continue to use those techniques or those practices or those things, even in our biochemistry, we continue to drive those practices when they no longer serve us. So that's one of the things that is most important to identify, not necessarily the initial trauma or tracing back to when it first started, but what practices and tools do we continue to live in and drive stress chemistry and drive things that are no longer serving our current mind, body, spirit state.
Well, let's jump into that and talk more about like how do you start to reset a stress pattern that might have been started in micro traumas and then is reinforced by certain habits over time. How do you then shift the root systems of that?
So one thing I love to talk about is that everybody is on some place in their healing journey. And when they embark on it, a lot of people try different things. So I'd love to share a graphic here that I actually drew out one year after working almost a decade with people and looking at my own experience. In this graphic here, I call it the healing journey. And it's sort of a phase, it's kind of like a hero's journey that I have seen almost everyone go through in a very similar pattern. So if we look at this healing journey, we can see that at the axis on the left here, that's sort of how we're feeling on a day-to-day basis. So we can, right in the middle on the line there, we have normal. I call this the baseline, or sometimes the horizon line, if we think about that. Anything above that is we're above the horizon. Our head is over water. We're feeling pretty good. We're great. We're starting to reach levels of wellness and optimization and superpower. So, being above the horizon is really stepping into our potential and our purpose. And then when we get below the horizon, when we have our head underwater a little, we have days where we feel okay, or we're just feeling a little bit off, or we're just functional. We're just getting by, or we've gotten to the place where we're dysfunctional. We cannot show up for our family, our friends, our job, our responsibilities, our self-care duties. So as we get lower and lower below the horizon, or we're kind of drowning underwater, people tend to have this experience where in the healing journey, there's often what I call phase one, which is mystery symptoms. And this is where people start to notice that things are a little bit off. Like they might have good days, they might have bad days, but what they're noticing is maybe their good days aren't as often, or they don't sustain that good feeling as long. This is often written off as aging. And I think that that's a really unfortunate way to think about our vitality and our life as we get into our golden years, because that doesn't need to happen for people. But if we're experiencing traumas that are unresolved, we kind of enter this phase where we're diminishing our life energy and we're having less good days and more bad days, but we can't quite put a finger on it. And it's not obvious enough to necessarily seek help for. So a lot of people are often in phase one of mystery symptom, and they're just looking for something more to get some answers. If that continues long enough, most people hit a place that I call rock bottom. And people who have had trauma or some sort of healing crisis in their life, they know exactly when their rock bottom is. And often if they go at that period to seek help, if they go to a doctor or a specialist or a counselor or a spiritual leader, they might get a label put on their issues. They might get a diagnosis or something at that point. And if they enter into an allopathic kind of symptom management phase, they kind of end up on this roller coaster that goes from functional to dysfunctional, but they never really get out of that and heal the root cause of it. Now, most of the people watching this program right now are probably in the third phase of root cause healing. They're continuing to ask, why? Why is this happening? Why is some things working and some things not working for me? And usually this is where I find people find integrative tools for looking at their mind, body, spirit. And they start finding things that are really addressing the root cause, and they start lifting out of that rock bottom phase. And the more and more they continue those habits, they tend to just have a higher average baseline. Of course, you see there's kind of a roller coaster dip. We're all going to have good days, bad days. We're going to have some flare-ups or some relapses with things that come up. But the goal for me for healing with any of my students or clients that I work for is getting them to phase 4, which is a new normal. This is where they've really learned to listen to the signals from their body, especially these sensitive bodies that have so many messages for us. If we can hear all those symptoms as valuable messages that our mind, body, spirit is communicating with us, we can take that incredible information and listen deeper and guide ourselves to the most unique healing journey for each person. So when we get to that new normal, this is usually where people have learned a lot of the tools that work best for their bio-individual mind, body, spirit. And they're in a place where their average days are much better than that baseline normal. So they're now in places where they're reaching true wellness, optimization, and really stepping into their purpose. So when people are, they tend to be watching programs like this, I find that they tend to be in phase 1 of mystery symptom, or maybe phase 3 of root cause healing, where they're looking to expand their toolkit. And, it's beneficial to do any sort of one-on-one healing or group healing, or just learning and engaging in different types of modalities at any phase. But usually when somebody's at rock bottom, they need a practitioner. They need somebody, a support team, to one-on-one help them through that process. And just to expand on what are some of these things that when I talk about toolkit, I want to share a second graphic with you guys. And this is a Venn diagram of what I call yin-yang medicine. And in yin-yang medicine, I found that through integrative medicine, there are a lot of tools that we can use for healing. And we really need a balance between that. Just like the symbolism of the yin and yang, where we can't have too much of one end, otherwise the energy, that polar energy, becomes imbalanced. So a lot of times when I start working with people, I help them evaluate what they've tried and what they haven't tried in the past. So when we look at things like yang energy, it's very action oriented. It's very, logical, analytical. It's about making a plan and taking action towards it. These can include things that look like lab testing, to look at our physiology, look at our stress markers, look at any deficiencies that we have, or stressors in our body, through looking at labs, doing things like diet or lifestyle protocols, any sort of like herbal, natural food, remedy type things. Those are very kind of yang approach. Also things that include exercise or objective tracking of things like symptom tracking, or, journaling to kind of figure out what the patterns of things are. These are all very kind of cognitive approaches, and they can be super helpful for people. And also this whole world of functional medicine and neurological rehab that I always incorporate in my classes, and I always incorporate with my patients. We really want to look at root cause of biochemistry and neurology, and how all of this we can kind of, biohack, as the popular term goes, how we can look at things like vagal nerve stimulation and resetting the parasympathetic nervous system. But we're doing it from a very intentional place. And when we look at the flip side of yin medicine, this is more of the receptive energy, the intuitive, the receiving, allowing the healing to happen. And so a lot of this includes the thoughts and the emotions, the spiritual types of modalities, the meditations, a lot of stuff that we can do without really taking action, or being super kind of gung-ho about it, but allowing ourselves to receive the healing. So things related to spirituality and breath work, meditation, body work, receiving things in our physical body. And so between those two is kind of an overview of figuring out what stage people are in their healing, and then kind of going through a checklist of different tools that they have in their toolbox, and what they've tried and what they haven't tried, and how we can kind of balance any polar energies to bring a more balanced, subtle approach to their individual healing journey.
Well, it's super helpful to see these not just as kind of complementary, but really just two poles that we need, both the yin and the yang of medicine, to really optimize our health. And I like that framing, to full integration, full balance, and true holism. How does this then translate into sort of a plan to, like, let's say that somebody is nearing that stage 2 kind of bottoming? You say you often need individual practitioner help. How do you design a sort of a plan to recover from this accumulation of micro traumas?
Yeah, so like I had mentioned, the first phase of that is always doing kind of a broad evaluation. So doing assessments, whether we do that one-on-one or we do that as a group. There's a lot of quizzes that I always provide my students and clients, in where they can sort of take a big picture assessment of where they're at. How much stress have they accumulated? How many micro or macro traumas have they had? And then kind of calculate that. And what I love about the types of worksheets and tools that I use with my students and my clients is that you can always revisit them, because everything is a snapshot in time and a snapshot in your life. And so you can reassess everything as you learn that process. And after we recognize something is going on, that acknowledgement and that recognition, then it starts to the next stage is kind of decoding what the messages are. So that's what I really dive deep in with my students and my clients, is helping them understand kind of the basic manual, like a user's guide to their mind, body, spirit. So when a certain symptom pops up, what is it telling us? Like when, for example, if we have physiological stress in our body, it shows up a very specific way. So getting food coma after having meals, or craving chocolate after eating, these are all really specific communications and messages that allow us to know that our body is imbalanced physiologically. And if we do things like that, and we listen to these very common messages that all of us are experiencing, and we give our body what it needs and what it's asking for, those patterns allow us to remove stressors that continue those, like I said, that adaptive physiology. We start breaking those cycles. And so in the process of the way that I go about trauma healing with people is kind of teaching, the top 10 communication messages. So like what we were talking about, a lot of things like energy management, where people are often really fatigued, whether it's they're fatigued all day long, they're fatigued before they eat food, or they're fatigued after they have a meal. These are all different, very specific physiological patterns. And once a person can learn what this pattern is and then match it to what they're doing in their life, it's actually quite simple to fix it. We're just learning a new language. It is like you're learning a foreign language. And if you learn what that phrase means, then you can respond appropriately. And so, having gone through this myself and guiding hundreds, if not thousands, of my online students through this, it's kind of a similar process. So when we all embark on that journey together, it becomes quite easy for people to personalize those plans for themselves when they learn to decode the language of what those traumatic messages are that are coming from their body. And so that's why, is a little bit unique how I approach trauma healing, because we're listening to messages from the physical body, we're listening to messages from the biochemical body, we're listening to messages from the mental emotional body, and then also the energetic body. And we take those and we sort of translate them into easy step-by-step actions that somebody can take. And usually when we learn that language, we become really fluent in our own healing.
Well, Natasha, you just make so much sense, and it's really clear this is such a holistic way to approach things, and I appreciate your practicality on all this as well. So I think now would be a great time to guide people in a process and a meditation to start to put some of this into practice.
So one of the biggest obstacles of trauma healing is actually that we numb ourselves to where we're storing that trauma. We disconnect or disassociate from where we're holding that chronic stress or that overwhelm or that trauma in our body. So one of the first steps is that we want to acknowledge and we want to start paying attention to it, because again, all of those symptoms, they're not the problem. They're actually the gifts of being the messenger. So we don't want to shoot the messenger. We want to actually tune in a little bit more and pay attention to what the messenger is trying to tell us. And we're going to do that really gently and really broadly. We don't need to worry too much about the exact message or what's happened in the past. What we're going to do is we're just going to tune into tension and tightness in our body. So if you want to close your eyes for a few minutes here, and if you can, put your feet on the ground or try to align your spine. If you're sitting down, put both your feet on the ground. Try to sit up straight on both your sit bones with your spine aligned and your neck above your shoulders. If you're laying down, that's fine too. If it's more comfortable for you, just lay in a straight, kind of straight line on your back. And just try to align your body, align your spine, align your chakras. And take a couple deep breaths. And if you can breathe in through your nose, and if you can breathe in, you can breathe out of your mouth as well to start to release some of that tension. Start tuning into your body as you're breathing. Follow your breath through your nose. Follow it down your trachea, into your lungs. Feel your chest expand. Try to feel your belly expand too as you're taking these breaths. And now that you've gone a little bit more inward, I want you to start feeling where there might be areas of pain or tension in your body, or even anxiety. If you have any fuzziness, if you have any tightness that you're holding on to, just start to draw a little circle around those areas of your body. Is it in your neck? Are you feeling it in your shoulders? Do you feel it outlined in your stomach? And just try to get a sense of what that feeling is. Is it anxiety? Is it discomfort? And just pay attention to it. Now we're going to acknowledge it. And with acknowledging it, we're going to add in a technique that I learned from Dr. Asha Clinton, who did advanced integrative therapy. And we're going to use our hands on our bodies. We're going to go through our major chakras and also some subtle energy centers. And I'm going to guide you through that. But we're going to do that with awareness of this tension in our body. So before we get started on that technique, I want you to just kind of broadly think about that pain, that tension, that anxiety you're feeling in your body and give it a number, 0 to 10. If 0 means it's not there, 10 means it's unbearable. And give it a number just intuitively if you think it's a 3 or a 5 or a 7, how much it's present there, how much it's screaming, how much it's whispering to try to communicate a message. And then what we're going to do is we're going to place one hand on our heart. Hope I don't hit my microphone here. We'll place one hand on the center of our heart, and the other hands, I'm going to walk you through statements as we go through these points. And I'll remind you as we do them. We're going to go to the crown of our head, our third eye or our forehead. Then we're going to go right here, hover over our chin with the palm of our hand. We're going to hover over our chin. Then we're going to hover over our throats. We're going to double up on our heart. We're going to go to one side of the heart, the other side of the heart. Now we're going to move down a little. I'm going to talk you through this. We're going to go right here in this soft spot where your rib cage becomes soft. So the solar plexus. Then we're going to put the palm over the belly button, the palm over the bladder. And now you're going to take the tips of your fingers like this, and you're going to put them into your hip fold. So right where your hips and your legs bend on one side, you're going to put them on the other side. And the very last position is we're going to take the palm of our hand and we're actually going to sit on it. So we're going to get to our sacral chakra. So now that we practice that quickly, I'm going to guide you through it with those positions. And while we do it, we're going to state a statement that's as simple as all the pain, anxiety, and fear I have in my body. That's it. We're going to say that every time. So you can say it out loud with me, or you can just say it in your head with me, but we're going to do this one pass through our whole system. So we'll start at the top here. One hand stays on your heart and one hand on the crown of your head. We're going to say all the pain, fear, and anxiety I am experiencing in my body. And you take a deep breath. Thinking about all that pain, fear, and anxiety in your body. And if you feel the need to yawn or cry or move or wiggle when you take that breath, do what you need to do. We're going to move to our third eye or our forehead and just repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I feel in my body. Take a deep breath and let it pass through. And now hover your palm over your chin and repeat all the fear, pain, and anxiety I feel in my body. You go over your throat, hover your hand gently there, and say all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. We're going to double up on our heart chakra here and repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Go to one side of your heart, put your hand palm over it, and repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Go to the other side of your heart and repeat all the fear, pain, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Take a deep breath and allow your body to move whatever energy it needs, if that's vocal, if it's tears, if it's a yawn, if it's a wiggle. Now move your hand over the solar plexus where your ribs become soft and repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Now put the palm of your hand over your belly button and repeat again. All the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Move the palm of your hand over your bladder or above your pelvic area and repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Now we're going to do the ones with the tips of our fingers here. We're just going to take all 4 of those fingers and put them in the folds of one of our legs right on our hips. Keep your fingers there and repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. Switch to the other hip with those 4 fingers, put it in the crease, and repeat all the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm holding in my body. And finally, take that palm of your hand and sit right directly on it. We're going to get it right there on our tailbone, our root chakra. We're going to do one last repetition. All the pain, fear, and anxiety I'm feeling in my body. Now, when you're ready, relax your hands. Take another deep breath. Move as you need to. Take a sip of water. And just let yourself find your center again. Do a quick scan of your body again. Another deep breath. And sort of evaluate those things that you did right before we started that and give it a number. Does it feel any different? Did it go from a 7 to a 4? Did it go from a 5 to a 0? And with this technique, what's wonderful about it is that we can keep changing the statement if we become more and more clear of what that communication, what that pain, what that discomfort is, and we can change the statement. So we can even make it more specific. We can do it again. We can pass through and say all the fear and anxiety I have about my relationship or about my job or about my health, or we can make that statement more and more clear and more specific to what we're going through. And we just acknowledge it and we go downward through our chakras to release it from our system. And we do this until we feel it's a 0. So you can just repeat it a second time or a third time or change the phrase. And it's one of the techniques that myself and almost all my students and clients have used in long-term healing and also in these kind of anxiety attack moments that really helps shift things in their mind, body, spirit.
Well, that was lovely. Thank you. And so just to kind of, explore a little bit more. So part of the acknowledgement is that the theory behind this is that we're not actually fully acknowledging or meeting the reaction in our body. Is that sort of what's going on? So we're actually taking the time to meet it on all levels.
Yeah, exactly. And, I like I say, all of those symptoms, they're just communications, they're messengers. I know people kind of get caught up on their symptoms and they think they're the problem. They want to get rid of the symptom. But usually symptoms start as a whisper of some sort of imbalance in our mind, body, spirit. And when we don't listen or acknowledge, what happens when somebody's whispering something and we're not being heard, and we tend to get louder and louder. So as the symptoms get louder and louder, they tend to need more and more acknowledgement. And so a
Hmm.
big part of that exactly is to first give ourselves space and not to run away and disconnect and disassociate, because there is some message there that we're needing to hear about a current or past imbalance.
Is it important then as a next step after that acknowledgement or meeting has happened to listen to what the original communication, which doesn't have to be as loud now, might have been?
Yeah, usually people just tend to feel a sense of peace as they go through this practice. And I think there's a lot happening. Like I said, there's shifts in their biochemistry. It's helping our nervous system come out of fight or flight and allowing us to go into more healing, rest and digest and repair state. So a lot of times, healing just starts to happen. So it's not necessarily that we need to hear a specific message and then take an action around it. It's not necessarily that we're waiting for a solution. Just the act of doing that starts to reprogram and reshape the way that our body is functioning in those patterns.
Great. So what else can you share, building on what you've already done? This whole pivoting of seeing the sensitivity and the sort of the accumulation of some micro traumas to really turning the sensitivity into an asset moving forward and a real gift.
Yeah, and I actually love working with sensitive people, and usually when they come to me, they have a pretty negative perception of themselves being a sensitive person. It's something they're like, oh, I wish I wasn't this way, or it has caused me so much pain or suffering. And one of my greatest joys is helping people understand that it's actually such a powerful gift. And I always use the analogy of the canary in a coal mine, which I think a lot of people have related to or heard, whether they've heard it as a positive or negative thing. But when we think about those canaries in a coal mine, there wasn't anything wrong with the bird. It was actually a beautiful songbird. To say that the bird has to change to be a stronger or more tough animal is kind of silly. It's like to recognize and understand that we are those canaries and we have these beautiful gifts that might look different than other people. So I love to work on trauma healing with sensitive people, because part of the transformation, part of the healing is actually helping them understand those superpowers that they have as sensitive people. And not only does that help them guide their own healing journey, it actually makes them more well equipped to go through healing, because they can sense so many things and hear those messages so much better than somebody else who needs guidance from an external healer. A sensitive person can really go through a lot of self-healing when they learn the tools and they learn how to translate that message for themselves. And then usually what happens too is, because they're so gifted at that, as they go through their own healing, they become a beacon of healing and light for others in their life around them, whether it's their friends or their family or people just watching them go through that transformation. So I think sensitive people often come in thinking that it's going to be a harder journey for them, or there's something wrong with them that they need to change or fix. But actually healing, trauma healing, this deep sort of mind, body, spirit healing is a journey that sensitive people do quite well on. And we can do it in a gentle way. It doesn't have to be a really abrasive modality that we use to get to that healing.
I love that. It really is so applicable to, I probably the majority of people who are drawn to the Shift Network, because people are drawn because they have a greater spiritual openness, greater sensitivity, a greater sense of intuition of a possibility for humanity that's more refined and more sensitized than often our somewhat brutish ways of business that have predominated on this planet. So let's talk a little bit about how people can go further with your work, since it's so grounded and so gentle and so effective. So Dr. Natasha has agreed to teach a brand new program for Shift. We're very excited about it. It's called Healing Trauma for Sensitives. Harmonize your mind-body immune system for micro trauma recovery and daily energetic balance. You can see it laid out in detail at the URL traumaandsensitivity.com, and is spelled out traumaandsensitivity.com. It's a 7-week program. There are no prerequisites for this. It's really just if you have an intuitive pull and recognize that this is important medicine for you and that you want to go further. So, Natasha, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your high-level intentions and outcomes people can expect from taking the program, and then I'll read out the module titles that give us a preview of what's coming.
Yeah, I really love just going through this process with sensitive people and helping them recognize their own gifts and their own superpowers. That's always the goal with any of the courses that I teach. And this one is really targeted at ways that these sensitive people have held on to stress or trauma or things that have been obstacles to them from reaching that greater potential that they have. I've taught a lot of sensitive people. I've worked with a lot of clients who are highly sensitive, empaths, intuitives. And sometimes we focus on health, sometimes we focus on just lifestyle things. But the one topic that comes up over and over, most requested, is how to address trauma as a sensitive person, because our experience is going to be a little bit different than people who aren't necessarily as sensitive. So because it's the most requested topic that I've ever had with students, I'm so excited to really specifically talk about this, not just broad lifestyle wellness for sensitive people. And then really get into a lot of the tools and the applications of how we can use things like body work and physiology, biochemistry, neurology, immunology, to really bring in all these practical ways that people can creatively mix and match and fine tune for themselves. Or a lot of times too, I get a lot of students or clients say, oh my gosh, I learned all this stuff and I'm seeing how it is applicable to my child or my partner or my friend or my mom. And now they're doing these practices that I've taught them and they're starting to heal too. So to me, it's kind of just that ripple effect of helping sensitive people really come out of any sort of obstacles or suffocation that they've been in with any of the stressors they've had, so they can be these beautiful songbirds that contribute these ripples out into the world.
Love that image of the beautiful songbird. So more of that, please. So module 1, understanding a new perspective of trauma so you can begin to heal as a highly sensitive person.
Yeah, so in this week, we're going to start with kind of those big picture assessments, like I talked about, really recognizing just that eye-opening conversation around what is trauma and do I have traumas that are still affecting me? And kind of that place of acknowledgement, and also starting to understand these concepts that are really foundational to a lot of the tools I use in the field of psychoneuroimmunology. So this is like where we're really looking objectively at how our thoughts and our belief systems are impacting our immune system and our nervous system and our hormones. So really kind of getting a big picture view of how we can view trauma differently.
Module 2, create a personalized nutrition plan for stress reduction.
So in this, we're going to go into the most common physiological and biochemical things that happen for people when they have stored traumas or post-traumatic stress disorder, and also a lot of just like natural lifestyle ways that we can use food and herbs and natural medicine to help balance that stress response and remove any of the stressors that we have through our biochemistry that are driving more stress chemistry.
Module 3, the post-traumatic brain, balancing your nervous system for healthier responses to stress.
This is a really, really powerful week where we go into, I guess, what you could call biohacking, where we're going to start looking at all these natural, non-invasive, gentle ways that we can more deeply access our parasympathetic nervous system, which is in contrast to the sympathetic fight or flight. We want to shift our body as much as possible into parasympathetic when we're in trauma healing. And that's our rest, digest, and repair state. And because these are binary states of our nervous system, we want to learn how to flip that light switch from sympathetic overdrive, which is where everyone with post-traumatic stress disorder is stuck. We want to learn more and more tools that we can naturally shift that light switch over to parasympathetic. So we get to kind of biohack our nervous system that week.
Module 4, techniques and practices to manage your difficult emotions.
So I love going into this too, because these are tools and protocols and actually kind of fill in the blank formulas where we can use communication. We can use words to actually heal ourselves and our relationships in the way that we start to perceive things in the world, because language is powerful. And when we start to understand how we are currently using language, even in our own internal dialogue, and how that keeps us stuck in a stressful state or an overwhelmed state. So learning some really, simple basic tools of how we can shift the language that we use from one thing to another, and how that can have this massive cascading effect on our psychoneuroimmunology.
Module 5, somatic stress management strategies to release tension and promote relaxation.
So that really goes back to the roots of my body work and a lot of what we did with our demonstration today, where we're going to really look at how we can get into our body and do things DIY ourselves without a practitioner working on us, that we can start to physically change our body, and how that physical change has that two-way street effect on our psychoneuroimmunology. When we change our physical bodies and we release tension, it changes the way that our chemistry and our hormones are communicating with our brain. And that is a great kind of two-way street in which we can start to shift our traumatic experiences, but through body work.
Very cool. Module 6 then goes into incorporate energy medicine and healing practices into your holistic recovery plan to connect to your inner vibrancy and life force.
So similar to the technique that we just did that I mentioned, that's a technique that comes from the field of energy psychology, where we're using psychological tools and we're mixing it with hands-on tools like chakras, meridians, those sort of things. So we're going to go into some of that and really dive into muscle testing and the different types of ways that people can start using energy modalities to not even consciously know what the traumas are, but help release them through our energy systems.
And finally, module 7, create a personalized plan to integrate and sustain your new healing practices.
Yeah, so after teaching several of these courses where we go through a lot of information and it's integrative and we kind of go on a journey, this last week is actually often my students' favorite week. I often call it a integration session, where we take all the concepts that we've learned over time. We're not necessarily adding on tons of new information, but we're weaving it all together and starting to make a plan for people that they can start to use these as new language. It's sort of like a cheat sheet or spark note of everything that we've learned through the whole journey, and then bring the pieces together and start to kind of troubleshoot it and build it so that it can be something that continues in their path.
Really great stuff. And I know this is going to create such a profound transformation for those who choose to join you for it. So I'll share a little bit more about it. Traumaandsensitivity.com is the URL. So you get not only the 7 90-minute live sessions with Natasha, which is really helpful because you can ask your questions live and also engage in interactive exercises. And there's real power of the group field. But you also get recordings of every session, video and audio. So you can go back to anything you missed or go back again and again to get the practices that you can apply. There's word-for-word transcripts for every session. There's weekly exercises and practices for home. There's a Facebook community to support you and deepen your experience overall, as well as small group time to connect with other participants. And on the page, you'll see a number of extra bonuses that are really designed to enhance your journey. There's a trauma assessment quiz pack. These are digital quizzes from Dr. Natasha. You want to share a little bit about those digital quizzes?
Yeah, so a lot of this has to do with many of my other courses and work. We've put them all together in a little workbook where, like I said, we can just do these assessments at any snapshot or any point of your life, where you go through a stress inventory, where you go through a sensitivity quiz, and you start to realize how much there's overwhelm and how much there's superpower in all those different realms of it. So it's just kind of a great DIY toolkit that people can continue to use to get started in this course, so they can sort of place themselves where they are in the healing journey, but also revisit over and over as they go through experiences in life.
Great bonus. And then there's a second bonus. It's actually 6 months of complimentary access to your Club Sensitive community membership. Want to share a little but about that special bonus?
Yeah, I love Club Sensitive. I have been running an online virtual community for almost 5 years now. We sort of started, when everything was shifting online, and it is a private social network. So it's not hosted on one of the large social media platforms that has advertising and privacy issues and distractions all over. It's private, and it's just with sensitive people. And so everyone who takes this course gets 6 months complimentary membership to that, so that the conversation can continue. They can continue to build the relationships. They can take anything they've learned and practice it more. And in that club, I also have other teachings and worksheets and lots of fun stuff happening. So it's a really dynamic 24/7 platform that people can access that's just literally full of other sensitive people. No distractions, no ads, nothing else.
Well, that's a great extra high value bonus to include 6 full months with that program. And I also want to draw attention, there's one special bonus that folks get who sign up right away. And this is our special gift that you get when you sign up by midnight. It's a video teaching with Dr. Natasha called Somatic Safety, Releasing Trauma Stored in the Body. So obviously we've referenced the body multiple times today. This is a special teaching that really goes into the deeper layers of that. Want to share a little bit more about that, Natasha?
Yeah, so I mean, I've mentioned several times too that a lot of my background is a body worker. I have a doctorate in chiropractic. A lot of my healing came from body releases and hands-on stuff. And because each week has a different focus, we are talking a little bit about it in the broader course. But there's so much to share with somatic release that I wanted to just go even deeper dive. So for people who wanted to learn more somatic releasing and really understand kind of how to get into different practices, strengthening, releasing practices, just physical stuff. So, it's more than we could fit into the weekly courses. So I wanted to really give an extra super bonus where we can go deeper into that hands-on stuff, which is also part of my unique approach to healing, not just the mental emotional stuff, but actually the physical releases too.
Very cool. Well, that's a great extra reason to sign up right away to get that special bonus on somatic safety. So we've kept the investment for this program very accessible for all the amazingness in it and all the bonuses. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to start on August 27th and run Tuesdays at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings and the transcripts in the community as well. And I particularly also want to encourage you to read through the page to where there's testimonials, because there's great testimonials about Dr. Natasha's work. Wonderful teacher, authentic, unique blend of knowledge, rare ability to blend clinical science with deep insight and empathy, holistic framework, valued contributor to the way of compassion. So many great endorsements of Dr. Natasha and her work. So you're in really good hands, and you will have a gentle and transformative journey into really opening up in new ways and helping to heal the micro traumas and claim your sensitivity as a real gift. So again, all the details are at traumaandsensitivity.com, and you'll get the special bonus when you sign up by midnight, which is somatic safety, releasing trauma stored in the body. Well, Natasha, we're at the end of our hour. It's illuminating, as always, to spend time with you. Thank you for your wisdom today, and anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering doing the 7-week program with you.
I really appreciate you for having me here, Stephen. I love all the work that the Shift Network does. And I really encourage anybody who just feels like a kindred spirit to join the course, even if they might feel overwhelmed by the topic or how the process might go. Really a big part of a lot of the work I do is just connecting with other sensitive people. And I think that experience in and of itself, where we're able to have these live Zoom meetings and we're able to have conversations and know that a lot of our experiences are shared among kindred spirits, that, I hope to meet you in this course because I love meeting other souls.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for that warm invitation and your offer to do this program, because I know it's going to bring so much value to so many. So again, it's all at traumaandsensitivity.com, and you'll get that special bonus on somatic safety when you sign up by midnight tonight. So thank you, Dr. Natasha, and thank you all for joining. Many blessings.
Thank you for having me.